Well, Happy New Year. I've got another farmer on the show as a guest interview. I know how much you love these. Today, we're going to be interviewing a chicken, beef, egg producer. We're going to look at his sales funnel. And as we do so, I want you to notice what are the things that he's doing well. And I want you to compare it to your own sales process. See what you can learn. There are some marketing gems hiding in here. Let's get started.
Hey there, this is Corinna Bench, and welcome to the My Digital Farmer podcast. In today's market, it's not enough to just grow your product. You've got to know how to sell it too. Welcome to the My Digital Farmer podcast, where we reveal online marketing strategies and tips to help farmers like you get better and more confident at marketing. Learn how to find more customers, increase your sales, and build a strong brand for your farm. Let's start the show.
Well, welcome to episode 244 of the My Digital Farmer podcast. I am your host, Corinna Bench, one of the farmers at Shared Legacy Farms out in Elmore, Ohio. I'm also the founder of MyDigitalFarmer.com, which is all about trying to help other farmers get more confident and savvy in their marketing and sales strategy so that you can grow a profitable business online. How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the show. Especially a big shout out to my regular listeners and anyone who's been binge listening. Raise your hand right now. If you're new to the podcast, thanks for checking me out. I want to encourage you to subscribe and go check out some of my back issues. I always tell people to go listen to the first 10 because I designed them to be an onboarding ramp into the marketing space. But there's a lot of gold in these back archives, so you can just scroll through, see what catches your eye, and basically get a free education in farm marketing. So I'm glad you're here. If you want to get onto my email list, that's another great way to learn the ropes of farm marketing. You can do that by going to mydigitalfarmer.com/subscribe. And I'll send you a weekly email for like 3 months in a row that basically drips out a curated selection of the best content that's going to help you learn the most important fundamentals of marketing. So I encourage you to do that. mydigitalfarmer.com/subscribe. Today I have a special guest that I'm interviewing, and Adam is one of my Accelerator members this coming year. So if you're not sure what Accelerator is, this is my small group coaching program for farmers. I take a group of 20 farmers through a 3-month experience in the off season, and each month we go through one project at a time and give it a full 30 days. And the goal is to build that specific marketing asset in our business. So I teach how to do it. You actually implement it. Then we meet up with some other people in Accelerator in a group coaching session to kind of look at our work and critique it. And then we also have a mastermind meet up once a month where we share ideas and crowdsource what's working well in our business. It's a really awesome way to connect with other high-level farmers who are trying to get their marketing engine up and running and in place. If you want to get on the wait list for Accelerator, I only run that once a year, but you can go to mydigitalfarmer.com/coaching to learn more about it. But what I tell people now, if you want to be taking these project classes that we're going through in Accelerator, if you want to have access to those, what I've been telling farmers now is to just subscribe to my farm marketing school. That's my online membership. It's a new thing that I've started in the last couple of months. And this is where you just pay a monthly fee and you get access to all of the projects, all of the workshop classes and recordings that the Accelerator program has built over the last year. So you don't get access to like the recordings of the group coaching sessions or the mastermind, but you just get to see the actual workshop class. And then I have like a resource folder that helps you DIY it yourself. So if you're a DIYer and you feel like, yeah, I can go in there, watch this class and build that lead magnet, then this is a really great place for you to check out. So I want to make sure you know about that because it's kind of new. And this is the time of year when I know when farmers are working on the backside of their business. So if you feel like you need some work on the marketing assets and you want to build a lead magnet or update the homepage of your website or create an email nurture sequence or build a promotion calendar, like there are classes, projects for each of those types of things inside of Farm Marketing School, and you can kind of master those elements and get those into position. So to learn more about that, go to mydigitalfarmer.com/FMS. And you can read all about what's included. I'm really proud of it, and I have a bunch of farmers in there right now, and it's going really well. So excited to have more of you in there. All right, let's pivot now, and I want to introduce you to my guest for today. Today's podcast guest is Adam Henson of Shady Brook Farm in Canton, North Carolina. Adam is a fourth-generation cattle farmer running a cow-calf operation in a grass-based production model alongside his wife, Jada. His dad and grandmother are stakeholders in the operation as landowners and have a small interest in the cow herd. In 2012, Adam made the switch from the commodity system to a direct-to-consumer model offering grass-fed and finished beef under their own label. Since then, they have added pasture-raised eggs in 2013 and pasture-raised chickens in 2015. They sell at a local farmers market on Saturdays, maintain an online store connected to their website, publish a weekly email to push customers to the online store and farmers market, as well as offer some small-scale subscription services. Please join me in welcoming Adam to the show. Well, Adam, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of this. I've been listening for a long time, first time caller, as it were.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on. I know you have a really neat story to share. I want you to just start out by sharing with my listeners an overview of how your farm got started, the size, the acreage, how many years you've been around, your staffing, just help us see like a general picture.
Gotcha. So the farm property that I'm on has been in my dad's family for generations. As a matter of fact, my great grandfather gave the farm its name, Shady Brook Farm, in the early 1950s. And so we've carried that through as a cow-calf operation since then. My grandfather, he ran the farm when I was a kid. And so my main experience with the farm is in lens of that. And he just kind of had it as a hobby farm. That was his release. He worked in manufacturing. He had his cows and he loved his cows, but that's kind of all it was. So when he passed and it came on to my dad and his brothers and me to run, it kind of put us at a crossroads as to what we were going to do with it. Continue just kind of letting it be a hobby or try to make something more out of it. My great grandfather was really big in show cattle and had a big name. And so that was kind of a golden age, I guess, in our family lore. So trying to get back into more than just a hobby farm and providing something of meaning to the community became kind of a focal point for us in that transition. So my granddad, he passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2006. I was in my early 20s, and that was just a horrible experience. The disease is horrible. The treatment for it was as bad. And that experience really put me into a place of not necessarily trying to know more than established medicine, but not being satisfied with the status quo. So when my wife and I, Jada, when we got married, we were really interested in that. We had a friend, or still have a friend, who's into holistic medicine, and I was experiencing some really major stomach issues. So like if I had ground beef that was really fatty, my stomach was done, kind of a thing. And so because we're interested in this holistic medicine stuff, we visited with a doctor that practiced kinesiology, which I'm still a little suspect about, but he ended up running some tests and identifying that it wasn't necessarily the beef that was the problem, probably some sugar or candida or whatnot. But anyway, that led us to realize that like really lean beef, and particularly grass-fed and grass-finished beef, was easy on my stomach, that I could handle that. And so that, really got us looking into more like regenerative type stuff. At that same time, we had some pretty major droughts here in North Carolina where I'm at. And we had participated in some programs with the state for pasture innovation. And it felt like we were throwing money out on the ground with fertilizer and those programs. And so that put us, on a path to just change literally everything we were doing as a farm, as a cow calf operation. Because I was a driving point on that, I got to take over the management of it. We end up switching all of our cows different genetics to get them to be able to thrive in that type of production model, and found that selling them at the stockyard was not what the buyers wanted. So we end up switching over to a direct to consumer model, harvesting our beef under our own label, got into doing a farmer's market, saw that having just one product at the farmer's market may or may not have been the best thing, added some eggs, ended up adding meat chickens. We did turkeys for a while, we did quail for a while, and kind of, figuring out, what can we grow and offer that we can sell. And so we're selling beef by the cut and bulk, and we're selling eggs, and we're selling chicken. And so that's, kind of a roundabout thing over the last 10 or so years of, making some major changes. And it feels like every 3 or 4 years, it's like, okay, we got to reevaluate, is this working and what's got to be different? And so, at one point, okay, let's do a website. Another point, let's do email marketing. Last year in 2020, we switched over to a full-blown organic and soy-free feed for our chickens. So I don't know that I've yet to get the traction that I want, but at the same time, I have learned that I can't do the same things and expect it to be different. So part of our recent history as a farm has been, well, we're willing to try. I don't want to say anything, but if something's not working, then let's pivot, make an adjustment, and see what we can do to make work.
Yeah. What is the goal behind this driving? What are you chasing?
So the farm is, as it stands, it's something I'm really passionate about. My favorite childhood memories are feeding the cows with my granddad. That's just something that is a fond thing for me. And so, as I'm thinking about it, how I want it to be more than a hobby, because farm animals are an expensive hobby, to say the least. And I've got 4 kids. I got 3 girls and a little boy. This farm property's been in my family forever, and it's not at risk of being sold or anything like that. But an idea of legacy is really important, and for that legacy to be more than just, oh yeah, we had cows, but instead to be, as farmers, we're a benefit to our community. Our county is losing. It's not ever been like a really big farm community because we're in the mountains. So there's not a ton of agricultural land, but what farms there are, we're losing them regularly and steadily to housing developments, and that sort of thing. So as the farm population regionally kind of dwindles, I feel like it's more important that the farms that are left are doing more than just being a hobby, but actually being part of the local food scene and providing good food that people can count on. We saw in 2020, right, with COVID and all that, the breakdown of trucking and supply chain. That's the word, supply chain. And so the idea of, well, how far does my food have to get to me? How far does it have to come? That was on the forefront of everybody's mind. So, that drive to innovate, to grow, to be relevant really comes from that idea, not only of legacy, in that the farm is still operating, but that we're providing something that's worthwhile, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us.
Yeah. So is your goal to make this farm something that you can run full time, not have another job, be wildly profitable, or like, what are some of those goals?
Yeah. So I'm the main operator on the farm. Jada, my wife's a big help to me as far as farmers markets. When we harvest chickens on farm, she's involved in that. My dad does a little bit when we're doing hay, but 90% of the labor's on my shoulders. And so one of the goals that I have is to bring in some additional help. That the thing with a farm, regardless of what you're growing, is the work is never ending. And while I enjoy the work and I'm satisfied by it, I don't want to look up and all my kids be grown and I've missed out. because I've been so busy trying to farm. So, one of the goals that I have is to be able to bring in an employee or two, so that we can do everything I want to do without sacrificing things that I don't want to sacrifice to get it done.
All right, well, this is a marketing podcast. And so what I wanted to do today was kind of walk through some of those marketing questions to help us analyze kind of how your system is currently running. And let's just make sure we've stated, like, give me an overview of the offers you're currently making, the products you're selling, and where those are. You did mention a farmer's market.
Yeah.
What are you currently doing, and what are you trying to build?
All right. So we are, like I said, we're selling beef by the cut. We do quarters and halves. We do eggs, and we do chicken by the cut. And so we are at a local farmers market on Saturdays. It's seasonal from April until December. We have a web store or an online store that's attached to our website. We do a little bit of subscription, and we do a weekly email. So the point of the email is to drive customers to the online store and to our booth at the farmers market. So that's probably, our biggest engagement piece as far as trying to drive sales, is that weekly email piece.
Mm-hmm. And have you identified like a magic number, a target goal that would be sort of your enough, like what you would define as success? You don't have to tell me what that is, but like, do you sort of know where you need to be?
Yeah, I think so. I would like to think so anyway. We'll see when we get there. I know, top line's one thing, bottom line's another. And, what's $1 million if it took you 1.1 million to make it? Right. So keeping those things in check is vitally important, so that the number works. But yeah, I think this year we're going to be right around 50K in sales, which is our best year to date by a lot. And I think if I can double that in the next 2 to 3 years, then I think that track allows me to do what I want to do as far as feeling confident and bringing in enough to try to hire.
Yeah.
At least on a part-time basis anyway.
Yeah. So you've crunched the numbers and you can see that. I'm only asking this question because I think sometimes farmers don't ask the what do I want question enough, and get really clear about, when do I know I've hit the target? When do I know that I've reached this milestone and I can celebrate and I'm
right
actually having the life that I imagine in my head? And
right.
What does that look like on pen and paper?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit about your audience before we dive into your actual sales funnel and taking a look at how that all works. How many customers are you currently supporting? And tell me a little bit about the kinds of clients you're attracting.
Yeah, so when I'm looking at my numbers for this past year, we were averaging about 50 customers a month, and they were making anywhere from 75 to 100, individual orders. That number's a little bit skewed because when we do cash sales at the farmers market, I can make out just one receipt to cash. So that the numbers are a little bit skewed there, both on the average order value as well as the actual customer number. So when I look at the number that I was just saying, around 50 or so, that's measuring individual customer receipts and on a monthly basis. And when I think about, like an ideal customer, that avatar, I have two kind of main customers that I think about, based on the people that we are selling to. And so both of the avatars are concerned with the health of, with their own health and how what they're eating contributes to that. And then the locality of their food. So, as few miles on the product as possible, it being local within the county or at least the region. Those are the things that are important to them. And so I have one avatar that is, a mom. I'm thinking specifically of a girl that I took some product to yesterday. She's got 2 kids. She's in her late 30s. She and her husband are both young professionals. And she's really concerned about what is in prepackaged processed food, and how to avoid as much of that as possible. And then the other avatar is a retired couple with disposable income that, again, whether it's from health challenges or just looking to not be at the mercy of someone else, wanting to cook whole foods and take as much responsibility for their health through what they're eating as possible.
I want to go back real quick to that number you said of $75 to $100. Like, help me as a vegetable grower to understand, like, is that kind of what you would expect an average sort of family unit to spend, or do you feel like that could go a little higher?
So I think on that, sometimes it depends on what they're buying. My customers that are buying a quarter or a half beef, their customer or their average value is obviously a lot higher. But
Right.
then I also have customers that they buy one box of eggs from me a week, and they do it every week, but that's all they buy. So there's a pretty big spread that's feeding into that average. When I think about the people that come through face to face on Saturday mornings at the market, I would say a $30 to $40 average is a lot more accurate, and that would look like a box of eggs and 2 packs of meat, somewhere right in that neighborhood. And it's with both of those avatars, we're selling chicken and beef, so they're not sourcing all of their meat from us,
From you. Okay.
or they're looking to only eat meat on certain days of the week. And so I think that that $40 a week is probably a closer number as to what am I actually providing them week in and week out with product.
Yeah, I'm just very curious personally, because I'm thinking about how much do I spend in my food budget on meat per month or per week for a family of 4. And yeah, it just kind of makes me wonder, as a vegetable grower too, like, I obviously want my average order value to go as high as possible, but there is a
Right.
limit, right, to
Yep.
how much a family can consume. And so you kind of have to figure that out as a business owner. Like, add more things, more offers to entice them to buy, but maybe there is just like only so much that a family is going to buy at some point in terms
Right.
of meat. So
Right. And there's, depending on the family, there's constraints too on storage.
yeah.
So I have one customer in mind that she gets a box of eggs from me every week, and she buys meat every other week. And she is in a studio apartment, and she has a small refrigerator, and she's very constrained by her storage.
Right.
You compare that to someone that's buying a half of a beef and they've got a big chest freezer. Their needs aren't necessarily different, but their ability to stock up or whatever is very different.
Yeah. Okay. What are some of the, because it sounds like your customer pretty well and that you have in some way researched them. What are the questions that you hear your prospects asking you before they buy for the first time? Like, what are they most concerned about?
Yeah. So on the chicken side of it, I spend a lot of time differentiating between free range and pasture raised. There's definitely an ideal. It's kind of like the red barn ideal in dairy. So when someone sees free range, they have this expectation that the chickens are just loose, which is a horrible way to manage for eggs in specific, but chickens in general, because everything likes to eat chickens. So with our pasture raised model, yes, they're outside, they're on the ground, but they are confined in specific ways. And so having to explain the difference between those two things, spend a fair amount of time, particularly at the farmers market, face-to-face interactions, explaining that. And then the feed part of it. So we switched over to an organic feed that's soy free. And so the next question after that is, well, what about corn? And why do you do soy free and not corn free? And so having to explain that those are probably the two biggest things on the chicken side. And then on the beef side, there is, in general, the welfare component is important, whether we're talking about the chicken or beef, that the animals are not in confinement. So the birds being outside as compared to stuffed into a barn, the cows being on grass, even in their finish ration, and not crowded into dirt lots. Like those things are important, but those are easily answered. The things that become more nuanced or that I get asked a lot about with the beef is, are you finishing on grain? So if you're not finishing on grain, what are you finishing on? And we do a 30 to 60 day finish on alfalfa, just depending on the time of year, to help it keep from having a very wild taste to it. Because grass, especially the grass that we have, is very seasonal. It tastes, the beef, if it comes right off of pasture, it'll taste very different in April than it will November. So the alfalfa allows us to have a consistent flavor and do an actual finish ration without having to resort to grain, which is really nice. And then the next question after that with our beef buyers is about vaccines. And that was, a really hot topic issue this year and kind of all over social media. But I feel like it transcends more into the health part of it. There's definitely been the scare thing or whatever with the vaccines and what's the government making you do, and a lot of misinformation to have to weed through. But once you get through that, then the customers that I know are going to, that I can say, yes, that customer is going to buy. It's more than just, no, we don't use like an mRNA vaccine. Like that's maybe the start of the conversation, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And we inevitably get into conversations about antibiotics and that kind of stuff. So those welfare questions that lend into the health aspect of, well, how good is this meat actually? Those are the things that I probably have the most conversations about.
What I'm getting here is that your customer is actually fairly well educated. They're asking more sophisticated questions.
Yeah.
Which is telling me that they're not at the very beginning of this journey, that somewhere they've been learning and doing research so they even know the right questions to ask you.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And that is especially true of the avatar that I have of the retired couple. That question, 9 times out of 10, someone that would fit into that profile, that's, the questions I'm getting from them. We're really close. Our major city is Asheville, North Carolina, and it's a pretty progressive town. It's, as in general, it's very concerned about, animal welfare and questions of health. There's a pretty good food scene there. And so that proximity, I think, is part of why I have customers asking sophisticated questions. And then, two, looking at specifically like that retired customer profile, a lot of those folks are moving here from somewhere else. So whether that's from, metropolises in the north or coming back from Florida because it was too hot, they're bringing experiences and information with them that's from outside of the region. And so concerns like, where do I get this, specific kind of meat product because I've had it from these other places in the past.
This podcast is sponsored by the Thriving Farmer podcast. Today, we are starting the Farm Business Minute with Michael Kilpatrick from the Thriving Farmer podcast. For the last few weeks, Michael has been sharing valuable business tips. Let's dive in to the question of the week. Michael, welcome back. Today, I have a question that I hear from a lot of farmers. They ask, how soon can I quit my non-farm job? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is not as soon as you think. And because again, I'm all a fan of knowing where your goals are, knowing what your vision is, knowing where you want to head, making those mile markers and then hitting those. And then as you move forward in your business, starting to phase out of your non-farm job. But what I like to say is we like to see farms have at least 6 months of living expenses saved up before they go that, and a profitable flywheel. So if they've done, let's say you have, year 2, you've done $100,000, you've got 80,000 expenses, you take home 20. And you say, well, if I go full time next year, I'll be able to do more of the labor myself and make 40. Well, that's all good and well, and that's B, but what if you have a drought? Or what if you have a hailstorm or something? So that's why I like to have that 6 months a buffer there. And it may take you another year to get there. But I think it's so worth it to lower the stress, because when you're stressed as a farmer, I see farmers circle. They don't know quite what to focus on, and they try to do a whole bunch of things, and then they don't get anything done, and that's when they crash and burn. So if they can, have that buffer of like, oh well, okay, yep, sorry, the market was down a couple $100 this week. Let's do a triage. Let's figure out why. But hey, look, we've got the money in the bank. We can pull a little bit on that just to get by, and we can regroup and keep moving forward. So, again, there's a lot of creative ways to save money. And I think that's a whole training I could do on, how little you can live on. Because as a business owner, there is a lot of ways to make the money stretch really, really far. But again, I think that also is that stress part, is you do not want to be stressing out about that. And so I tend to take it a little slower, make sure we build a little bit more reserves up, and make sure we focus on in our business is reoccurring revenue. So that's where we have, our monthly reoccurring CSAs, because that brings in revenue every single month. Or, just committed people who are buying every single month of the year. So that's important for us, just to make sure we have that continuality in the business.
Yeah, really knowing what your cash flow is going to look like too, and having a good budget plan. How many years do you think it takes on average for a person to make that switch?
That's a great question. And to your point there about knowing your cash flow, we have a weekly projections that we run. So it basically has every single week we put in, what comes in, what's going out, what the labor was, and we look at margins and all of those different things. So that's something we do on weekly. But how many years does it take is I typically see 4 to 6 years. I've seen people do it as little as 3. But 4 to 6 years is because that by then you have gotten a lot of your capital in place. You've paid off some of that, so you don't have that payment going out. But once you start, that's starting to get paid for, and you start to build your profit flywheel, you start to be able to do that. And it really depends on like what enterprise you are. If you're a beef enterprise, it's going to take longer because cows take a long time to mature. If you're doing microgreens, it can be a lot quicker if you're in a really hot market and there's not a lot of competition, because there's a tremendous, microgreens are just fast scale and not a lot of costs associated with that scale. So it can, depending on what your crop is. Again, if we go back to an orchard, that could take 5, 6, 8 years before some of those things start to mature. So every farm's going to be a little bit different. But again, if we're going back to that vegetable farm, I've seen it, that 4 to 6 year mark. And if you can get over that hump, you really tend to start making really go of it.
That was your farm business tip of the week. Check out the Thriving Farmer podcast with Michael Kilpatrick on your favorite podcast app. And now back to the show. I want to switch and pivot now to talking about your actual marketing funnel, the system that you've sort of put in place, because it sounds like you have a good grip on what your customer's problem or pain point is, or what they want, and what the questions are, what information they already know. And so maybe the first question I want to ask is, on the very top of your marketing messaging funnel, are you providing answers to these questions? Like, what is the information that's being put out at the very top of the funnel just to draw people in the first place? How do they hear about you and get attracted to you?
Yeah, so we've tried a number of different, avenues with that. One of the things that we've been most consistent with has, over the last 5 years, I guess, has been doing a weekly email. And so we try to, make sure we have like a paper list at the farmers market. Anytime someone wants to get into an in-depth conversation, it's always, well, sign up for this and I can answer those questions, and I do a weekly email where we talk about those things. And that's been an okay driver as far as getting people into the funnel. I have found recently that the more engaged I am on social media, then the better everything is. And it's a weird thing because there's not a one-to-one correlation on post to email sign up or post to sell. But like when I look at my numbers for this year, I put a lot of effort in October into just being consistent, posting something. We had a really dry fall, and so we had amazing sunsets. And with the way that the farm property lies, I've got a really long view, and I post a sunset picture at least, twice a week. And when I look back at the sales numbers, September to October doubled. And so again, there's not a correlation on 1-to-1, but it's like the more engaged I am there, then the more people are engaged with me further down the funnel. So once they get into our email system, we're doing a sequence at the top. Like that's the first thing they get. That's a welcome. I think I don't remember, 6 or 7 emails long. That welcomes them to the farm, talks about the production models, that tries to answer, some of those frequently asked questions, to answer, like the philosophical questions of why our products matter. It has a couple emails that are some cooking tips to help answer an external problem of, okay, you told me this is different. So if it's different, what do I do with it? How do I make sure that I enjoy it? And then we have a customer spotlight as well to try to, shine put a mirror up of, if you enjoy our products, then this is what that can look like. And so that's the welcome sequence. And we've recently added that to our arsenal, but I'm really excited about it just because I felt like I've been doing the weekly email for so long, but it's like I get customers into that funnel and they just jump in midstream. And so I'll have people that I talk to at the farmer's market, or they reply to the email, man, this was so great. I loved reading this, whatever, which is great. That strokes my ego, but I wasn't necessarily seeing that conversion to sell. So, the hope with this top of funnel sequence is that it's warming up these customers, asking questions, giving them something to aspire to, so that the weekly email, instead of being like a midstream jump in and do I sink or swim in this, like they are ready to make some purchases and move further down the funnel.
Yeah, you've sort of curated the first preliminary messages. Everyone's getting the same thing, and then you can kind of know they've all been told this onboarding message before they start getting the weekly email. Doesn't feel as jarring. That makes sense. Let me back up and ask you, before they get onto the email list, because that's kind of like middle of the funnel for me a little bit. Like, what is the messaging that's happening out in the wide world? Like, so you mentioned social media. Like, what are some of the things that you are putting onto social media? What is the content that you want to place there to attract this person? What have you noticed? You mentioned sunsets, but like, what from all these frequently asked questions that you get, like, is that helping drive what you decide to talk about?
Yeah, probably the biggest part of that is, production type stuff. Pictures of the animals, which pictures of live animals don't go well with live meat. So there's, when I'm posting on social media, there's generally not a, come to the website, here's the link to the store kind of a thing. So it is more, like philosophical problem solving of, these are our cows in the pasture. This is the pasture move from yesterday to today. These are, the meat chickens in the pasture shelters that are being progressed through. We have a Pyrenees that stays with our laying hens, and he's photogenic, kind of a thing. And, there's definitely different opinions on whether or not you should feature your kids on social media, but we do that from time to time as well. I don't saturate my feeds with them, but I do use them in that way to a point.
Yeah, well, and I think that's partly why your type of customer might be drawn to you, is because they want it to feel like a small farm, and they're supporting a real family, and so when you show that,
right, and that's definitely part of the local thing too. It's not only right here in our community, but it has a face. It has a name attached to it. When we support them, it's for us, but it's for them too, kind of a thing.
Adam, how are people finding you? I mean, you apparently are on social, and they must that must show up in their feed somehow. But like, are there other ways people are finding out about your business? What do you know about that?
We did some Facebook ads earlier in the year and had some pretty good returns on that. I enjoyed that. We definitely encourage, word of mouth. I had a conversation last week with one of our customers, Julie, that's been a great customer, and she was buying chicken feet for broth, and she bought a pack for her acupuncturist. And she was saying, my acupuncturist turned me on to chicken broth, and so I want to turn him on to you. So this is a gift that I'm giving him. So we definitely have some word of mouth. I would like to see more like an ambassador type idea thing on social media. I've struggled to get people to like take pictures of what they've cooked and share it and tag us. And I'm not sure if that's that I'm not instructing it correctly, or if it's because food is hard to take pictures of. But I would like to get more of that, because I do know that there is word of mouth happening in face-to-face scenarios.
What about SEO? Like, are people going to Google to look you up?
Yeah, so we do. We have the Google business listing. So if you type in, I think the keywords are, chicken and beef close to me, that triggers the farm name. There is a farm in Pennsylvania that has a similar name that I know we get some cross contamination with on Google and on Facebook.
Yeah.
But I guess that's kind of the nature of the internet being global. But yeah, we do have the Google business listing and have some keywords that are firing there. And they're probably the biggest thing with that is probably if, location services are turned on and the search includes, close to me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the moment a person decides to turn into a buyer. How are you guiding them on what to buy first?
Okay. So when I think about our gateway products, eggs, that's an easy thing to use. But good eggs can be very different than not good eggs. So that's kind of the obvious thing of, okay, yes, this is better. On the beef side, ground beef is what I consider a gateway. And again, it's versatile, it's forgiving. When you cook it, you can use it a lot of different ways. And on the chicken side, even though it is a bit more of a premium product from a cost standpoint, I look at chicken breast as a gateway from the versatility and ease of use. It is easy to mess up chicken breast, but most people are familiar with it compared to chicken feet, for instance.
Right. So is that something that you do? I mean, when someone comes to your stand or they're in your email pathway, I mean, are you pushing this first product, like this is where you should begin?
Yeah. So when we look at the top of funnel nurture sequence, one of the things that I set up to transition out of that sequence into our weekly email was, okay, what now? What do I start with now? And featuring those three things. I had a lead magnet last year, 8 steps for moist chicken breast. I'm not using that currently, but I have that in that email, that last one in the nurture sequence, as a way to not only encourage the buy, but what do I do with it? How do I make sure that I enjoy it? And so, yeah, those are the three things that we sell the most of on an individual cut basis, and definitely, the thing that I'm telling people to start with.
Yeah. And so what is how do you encourage the repeat buyer to come back? Or is there is there an obvious next step to get them to graduate? Now try this, or is that sort of a free for all right now?
It would probably fall into a bit more of a free for all. I do, in my weekly emails, I do try to introduce recipes on, especially if I have things that I've got a lot of, like, let's do a recipe that features that, so I can try to move it. But at the same time, even cuts that are fairly normal, maybe, or at least the people are familiar with, to use it in a different way, just to try to spark some creativity or some ideas. Yeah. And, when I think about my weekly email, I'm doing that at least once a month, some kind of recipe idea. And I try to make sure that if I was going to share something, we've tried it, so that I'm not, talking out of the side of my mouth, kind of a thing of, yes, you can cook this really exotic thing, maybe.
What have been some of the different offers that you have tried out over the years that have worked really well? I mean, have you tried bundling things, or have you ever had a promotion that went wild that you got good results from?
So, yeah, we do a number of different bundles. with probably more on the chicken side than the beef side. I do a 10 count of ground beef. That's like it has a volume discount, and I sell a lot of those. I probably sell as many 10 counts of ground beef as I do single counts of ground beef. And that's an exclusive thing through the website. So most of our ground beef sales that are through the website are the 10 count, whereas at the farmer's market, it's single counts. So that's been an effective thing for us. On the chicken, definitely will try to do a number of different bundles just because I have a lot more of it. Whether it's a 10 count volume discount, or like right now I have a sausage sampler because we're able to do fresh bulk sausages. So I have a 4-pack that it's a little bit of a discount, but it's all or none, on that sampler. I have a chicken bundle that's kind of like the price anchor. That's the big price point in the chicken category. That's a whole chicken and then basically 2 more birds cut up, and all together, kind of a thing to get like a big ticket item on chicken. And then we do halves and quarters on our bulk beef, which that's something that has grown in popularity. So with the way North Carolina works, I'm sure other states are like this too. You have to have what they call a meat vendor's license to sell under your own label. And there's a loophole in the rules. If you're selling bulk, quarters, halves, wholes, if you sell the animal while it's alive, you don't have to have the meat vendor's license. And so there's some other rules, but that's it in a nutshell. And so when we started trying to do direct to consumer, I was focusing on that and couldn't sell a half a beef. Of course, when you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to do anything. But as we jump through the hoops to get our vendor's license and sell by the cut, the longer we do that, then the more interest and popularity has come with the bulk beef. So like last year, I actually oversold what I had for bulk beef, which was interesting. So I ended up harvesting a couple of cull cows for our by the cuts to push the bulk beef, because like by the cut's great. There's good margins in it, but it trickles in, and selling a half, selling a quarter, that's a big payday. I do a deposit for that early in the spring, the balance when we harvest. So that does a lot, especially in the first part of the year, to let us map out, okay, this is money that we know is coming in. It helps us buy chicks in the spring to get started with meat birds. So that, thinking about it from an offer standpoint, that has been a benefit to us. And it's something that is probably the shining star when we look at our sales category, as far as we sold all of what we had to offer plus, and it went well. I have an expectation to sell out again next year and continue to have a waiting list with it. Whereas, by the cut, I have weeks that are really great and weeks that aren't. So it varies a lot more, kind of a thing. We, this past week, I did some posts on social media leading up to about bone broth in specific and making it at home, that led up to doing a landing page for a lead magnet that we're doing right now. It has broth recipes, and I was giving away a chicken back to make it at home. And while that wasn't wildly successful, it's been the most successful thing like that I've done. And so it's kind of like the 1-2 punch of, here's a post about why it's beneficial. Here's a post about how we store it. So my wife she had this, I don't know where she found it, but it's a great idea. She has a silicone muffin tray. She freezes the broth in that, and it comes out in pucks. And so it makes it so easy to use. And so like we drink it in the morning, and if I don't have pucks, then I don't drink it, because that's how it's easy for me to get it thawed and in a cup, and I know how much it's going to be, and I'm not wasting it, kind of thing. And so we shared that, and then we followed that up with, well, here's the landing page for the lead magnet. And it was good. And the thing about that is that's a very niche customer, but the customer that's interested in making broth, they're probably interested in organ meats. As compared to like the lead magnet with the chicken breast, I have people that buy chicken breast, but that's all they buy. So, using a lead magnet to not only get people on the email, but to, understand more about what kind of customer they're going to be.
Yeah, I would encourage you to keep repeating that hockey puck concept
Yeah.
for a while. Like, just keep showing yourself, here I am drinking my bone broth again this morning, because it might just be people need to get used to that idea, like, what is this? And if they keep seeing it, then now they're intrigued to actually try it.
Right.
And I also love that you're recommending the dosage size, right? Like, this is how much you have this often per day, and that helps a person then create a habit out of it.
Yeah. So I ended up having another post about it this on Monday, because I didn't have the picture for it last week because we missed the opportunity. But my wife and I, we see a chiropractor once a month as part of our health routine. And our youngest daughter, we homeschool all of our kids. Our youngest daughter, we were having some behavioral issues with, and just really wanting to avoid like ADHD or any of that kind of stuff. And so we talked with the chiropractor about it. And so she had some suggestions. And one of the things that she suggested, because she knew that we were regularly consuming bone broth, was to get our kids to. And of course that went over not well. I don't, the kids, I don't want that. So we end up doing a hot chocolate that used bone broth as the base. And that has went really well. The kids like it, and it's allowed us to make a big deal out of it for them. So I shared that on Monday. And I got as much or more traction over that as anything. And some of it was like, that is nasty. And then some of it was, really intrigued. Okay. Like that's a great idea, kind of a thing. So that's been a really interesting, kind of series of posts, because I generally don't ask for anything from social media. I generally just treat it from an awareness standpoint. And so, putting the landing page for the lead magnet was outside of the norm, but then from a conversation standpoint, it got a fair amount of traction. That was positive. It took up a lot of time, but it was a positive experience on that.
Yeah, so much of social media can be just trying to figure out what is working, what's going to create like a buzz effect. Sometimes you don't necessarily see sales from it, but maybe it creates momentum. Maybe it creates energy and buzz, and that can be something that, in my opinion, is a value to the brand. Keeps people's eyes coming back to you, saying, "What are they going to come up with next?"
Right.
Or you just need to have a few repeats of the same information before they're finally willing to try it, because it's just initially it sounds so weird they wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah, so social media's purpose for you, it sounds like, is to just make people aware of the things that you sell and showcase your family's lifestyle, talk a little bit about your values, create that empathy with the potential customer. Are you then also using it as a place to get email leads? You said you did experiment with that landing page.
Yeah, so that's the first time that I've done that.
Okay.
And it returns some emails.
I would encourage you to do that more. Like, just play in the sandbox and figure out, because to me, that's the primary purpose of social media, is to get the email address, like to attract the right person, and then occasionally have something there to say, hey, get on my list. So that they can move from just watching you to now I'm on your Rolodex.
Right.
Yeah. Where do you feel, I always tell people to follow the energy. And good things happen. Like, where do you feel energy right now within your brand, within your business? What are you excited about?
Well, I've had really good success this year with our bulk sales. And, as I'm thinking about 24, I know that I know how I'm limited on those animals for next year, but I also have an expectation, like, they're going to sell, and I may not have to do the 5-day sell sequence for them. I may not have to do any more than contact the people that bought this year, and then maybe the waiting list, and not actually have to do the sequence for it. And so that, that's great, because, it's not money in the bank, but it can be counted on, kind of thing. And then we did an egg subscription this year. So I had a number of customers that pre-bought like 20 weeks worth of eggs in March. And I have verbal commitments from all of those customers to buy again next year. So that's been a bright spot. So those are the things that I'm jazzed about. I know I'm increasing my lay and flock for next year to try to increase that. So eggs, one box at a time is important at the farmer's market. It definitely brings people to the table. And when we don't have eggs, trying to get people to come to the tables, more work. But at the same time, like whether it's a weekly subscription that's paid on a weekly basis or upfront, knowing that I need X number of boxes of eggs this week and that they're going to go out, that they're not as perishable as like cut vegetables, but they still have a shelf life. So, having that confidence that I'm moving these at a minimum, that's been a great thing.
What is the platform that you use to sell your products online? Is it Local-Line?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of migrating from Squarespace to Local-Line. So we opened the online store in January of 2020 on Squarespace and had to like set up weight ranges. And so there's like a set price for each like range instead of by the weight. So, there's basically the way that I do that is I take the average weight of the range and apply the per pound price to that. And then that's what's paid for that, for whatever is across that range. And that's been okay because it got us online. It's run its course with me just because I am tired of explaining to people, no, it's not, that chicken's not $30 a pound, that chicken's $30 or whatever. And the different options for variable weight sales online have gotten to be not only more numerous, but I think a lot better over the last 2 years anyway. So yeah, we're migrating to Local-Line and are looking to have that launched by January 1 is the plan.
So is that confusing? I'm just out. The reason I was asking this question to begin with was like, what is the customer user experience like to come to an online store? And what are they seeing? Or like, what do they see first?
Right.
Do you have categories? Is it easy for them to figure out what all you even sell at a glance, or is it a little confusing? And then just this whole weight thing, like,
so
navigate that
on the Squarespace store. I'm not sure if it's just default to that platform or if it was the template that we were using. There would be a tile view. There would be a menu with different categories. And try to provide pictures and product description. The weight range thing, that's definitely been a frequently asked question. Like,
so that becomes a barrier.
You
feel like it stops.
It's definitely a hurdle. Once my customers have gotten used to it, it's been fine because they know what to expect. And I know next month, when I switch over to Local-Line, I'm going to have to do some education because it's going to be different. And anything different is a little bit of a hurdle. But because, when you go to the grocery store, you buy meat by the pound. And because that is the expectation, that has been a constant education piece and a constant hurdle to be able to utilize that platform. And it did what we needed it to get us online. And having an online store that's open 24/7 is fantastic. I had an order come in Monday morning. Our weekend this past weekend was rainy, and so we've got one more weekend at the farmers market before it closes. I'm really close to my sales goal for the year. It's like we're going to the farmers market, and it was awful nasty, and we sold some stuff. I had an order come in on Monday morning that was the same total as what we sold on Saturday because the web store's open, all the time, and they can shop from the convenience of their home. So Squarespace got us online and it's been good, but it's run its course as far as what it does for us, just because we're not the customer that Squarespace is after at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, what I want people to hear from that interchange just there was how a simple speed bump in the actual buying process can stop someone in their tracks and they can abandon the cart, right? And
Right.
sometimes we're like, why isn't anyone buying? And
Yeah.
it may just be like they get to a certain point, like they have the intent to buy, they begin the process, and then there's something confusing, either online or even not online, where they have a question and they feel bad asking it, or it's going to take too many brain cells or too much time to figure out the answer. And so they're like, I'll do it later, and they leave. So it's a really good practice for people to try to go through their point of sale process with a very particular eye, and ask yourself, where would someone get hung up? What am I assuming that I shouldn't be assuming? Or even to ask a stranger to do it, right? And be like, what was confusing to you at this point? And you can learn a lot. There may be something that's really not your fault that's holding people back, and it's so okay. I'm glad to hear that you're aware of that and you're switching to a different platform.
With that, as far as even hurdles go, and just little things that cause speed bumps, we had a predator attack on our laying hens in July that cost us any extra eggs to sell for 6 weeks, because I had my subscriptions, they were prepaid, they got priority, so there was no extra eggs. And so there's a sold out sticker on eggs, but because that's a gateway product, I had that at the top of the store. And I'm looking at sales in August and September, and they were lower than they have been historically. And it was one of those things of like, I think I had around that time, I think I heard your podcast on price anchoring. And it's like, is that sold out sticker on one of the first products, is that turning people away? Are they not even scrolling through the rest of the store because the first thing they're seeing is sold out? So we actually end up moving that to the bottom of the page on the tile view for the whole store. And in October, we were double what we had been. And there's multiple, I know there are multiple reasons why, but they also kind of all collated at the same time too. So those, any kind of hurdle, like if you can identify a hurdle and get it out of the way, it is worth doing.
Yeah. And I don't know if I know this super well, but I could probably learn more about this, but I do know that just how the store is designed and where things are and where they aren't, and what's included and what's not included can really make a big difference. Watching a heat map of like, where are people clicking with their mouse and moving, and can be very instructive for how a little small change in the store can make a big difference.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. We can move on.
All right. Okay. I want to start wrapping up. You are a part of Accelerator, and I know you came to Accelerator with a very specific goal. When we had our discovery call, you were talking to me about that. Can you maybe just make a comment on what you've learned so far, or what you've appreciated about Accelerator, and maybe something a little bit about the email marketing piece?
Yeah. So one of the main goals that I had for Accelerator was to improve our email marketing. So I've been doing a weekly email for a while. I like the writing process. My educational background is actually in print media. So I studied to be a reporter and worked as a reporter for a little while in my 20s. It was a horrible job. Would not recommend it. And so I come into doing email marketing thinking, I know how to write. Like, that's in my wheelhouse. I can do that. And, being self-editing, I feel like has been an issue, not from like a grammar standpoint, but from I can write, 3,000 words. I can talk about this just at length and it's fine. Nobody tells me I can't. And as I'm looking at this email thing, like, I have loyal readers, but I was not seeing the sales that I wanted out of it. So in coming into the Accelerator, one of the things that probably hit me the hardest was, this is not the type of writing that I learned how to do. It's a different thing. And just because I'm not trying to get, on the printed page where brevity is so important, brevity is still important. I know I did like a blog style email in August, I think, on vaccines. That was I managed to get it to like 1,200 words, and I had a ton of feedback on that because people were interested in it. But it still didn't necessarily lead to sales. And so that idea of like, this is different than what the way I've been using, or it needs to be different. I need to approach it different. That it's almost been like being back in college in a way of that there is something to learn. You may be good at it, but you're not the best at it because you're not getting what you want from it. So being open to that has been really big. I know I got in the hot seat for one of the nurture sequences. Yeah, for the nurture sequence. And that was, I don't want to say humbling because it wasn't bad though. It was good of like, okay, yes, this is what I remember liking about being a writing major in college of here's my work and I'm going to let you think about it. And it was good. So there wasn't any, really negative comments, but it stretched me, it challenged me to think through, am I communicating the way I think I'm communicating? And there's a quote like, what the problem with communication is that we think we're communicating. So, being able to be in a situation where what I'm putting out that to me is really clear, is that actually communicating what I want it to, and be able to look at that, more objectively. And I feel like I'm really jazzed about not only the top of funnel nurture and the things that I've added to what I'm doing, but just here is how I can improve even the weekly email. Whether we're talking about the drop into the action type idea instead of going on for however long, introducing something like get to the point. That it's not that we can't tell stories, but it is like they don't need to know about the cat or whatever. That's just outside of the main plot kind of a thing. And yes, I am self-editing, and there's as much white space as you want on a document, but at the same time, like thinking about it from the customer's perspective. And while I do want my customers to consume my content, it's more important to me that they're buying the food that we raise. That the content needs to be an auxiliary to the product and not the product itself.
Yeah. Or in service to that aim. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have been some of the big marketing aha moments that you've had this year? Not necessarily with Accelerator, but are there these could be breakthroughs that you've had, just ideas or thoughts, or they could be actual hacks that you've learned or innovations that you've tried. Do you have something you could share?
Yeah, so I think on that, really pinpointing the why we do what we do and communicating that has been something that I haven't done well in the past, that has become not only important, but also kind of a talking point. So I mentioned at the top of our conversation, not being able to handle eating ground beef, but I'm a beef farmer, right? Like I'm raising cows and we're selling beef. And what do you mean, you can't handle your own product? And how that initiated some change. Like I have found that when I shared that with people, it resonates. And it kind of holds like a mirror up to the thing of like, yeah, like what I eat, it can be important to my health or the way I feel or whatever. And so it's not necessarily like an aspirational thing, but it's easy to relate to. And so, using that as part of the marketing material as far as why what we do is important to you, and answering like a philosophical question, and being more than just, yeah, we have what we think's great and you should want it. That's one thing I've learned too, is like, just because, we're doing grass-fed beef or feeding our chickens organic feed, like that does not mean that people are going to flock to our market booth or our website to buy it. Even when they learn that that's what we've got, it's just in and of itself, it's not enough. That idea of why is it important? Why does it matter? Reiterating that, and particularly in a relatable way, has been a huge aha moment for me this year.
I like to use the word mirror. When you tell your story and get vulnerable and empathize, hey, this is my world, this is how it's playing out in my world. What you're doing is you're holding up the mirror and asking them, hey, is this you? Are you feeling this too? And when you can successfully hold the mirror up as you tell your own story and they see that your story and their story, something magical happens there. And now they're willing to buy in
Yeah.
a way they weren't before.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the story brand stuff from Donald Miller.
Mhm.
That tracks with me. Like I
Yeah.
read through that and it makes sense. Like, yes, that makes sense. But one of the things I've learned with that, so he uses the hero and guide language and the idea of making our customer the hero and being the guide to them. I had struggled with that previously from the standpoint of like, well, the guide needs to know, they need to be the expert. And yes, they do need to be the expert, but like it's okay for me to be the guide while I'm figuring it out still.
Yeah.
Like I'm in process with this and we can be in process with this together. And like you mentioned just a second ago, there being some vulnerability in that. And yeah, there is an expectation of like with the vaccine thing, because I'm a cattle producer, I should know about it. And my customers may not. And so I get to inform them. But at the same time, like on using chicken broth for gut health, like I mean, that's something that I'm doing and learning about, and I feel like it's working for me. But at the same time, I'm in process on that, and so inviting them into the process, and being a guide from that perspective has allowed me to utilize his ideas on hero and guide a lot more effectively.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I can see how that would be a concern, and I've certainly felt that myself. Some of the mentors that I follow talk about it in terms of, if you are just one step ahead of your audience, that's enough. I've also heard this idea of taking on the role of a reporter, which is sort of what you were describing there, that you haven't necessarily figured it out yet, but you are reporting what you are learning along the way, and that can also be a way of being a guide. I like that. All right. Well, where can people look you up and learn more about your farm if they're interested?
Yeah, so our website is shadybrookgrassfarm.online. And then our Facebook handle is the same, and Instagram is Shady Brook Farm NC.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Adam, and I want to thank you for sharing behind the scenes of your business, how it's working now, and there have been some really good little marketing gems hiding in this conversation. Thanks for being willing to, I know you were a little nervous about coming on. I think you nailed it. You knocked it out of the park, and I'm really glad that you're in my community. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's been really good being in the accelerator program, and taking, like, I've listened to your podcast for a long time and trying to implement those ideas. It's like, okay, I listen to that while I'm driving or building fence or something, and it sounds great then, but I don't necessarily bring it back and implement it. With accelerator, it's okay, this is the project. So if I want to pay the money for it, then I need to engage. And that I've seen a ton of ROI from that, just because it's changed how I'm consuming, the media or the content, and actually implementing it. So instead of having all these ideas in my head, it's like, well, no, this is on paper and we're doing this now, kind of a thing. So from that perspective, my experience in accelerator has been well worth it for sure.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I love that you're building fences while you're listening to the show. I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember when it was 22, maybe. You had a friend of mine, Stacy Thompson, on your podcast. And I remember, like, I listened to that podcast, setting posts for the accelerator or for the fence, and my earbuds kept falling in the hole, kind of a thing. So, that's one thing about farm work, is there's plenty of like labor intensive jobs that you can either turn your mind off or you can, try to learn something. So in general, like I consume a lot of stuff in those moments. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's like, well, I don't remember anything that was said, but at least kept me
entertained you.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Adam, for being on the show.
Well, I hope you got a lot out of that episode. I know that I did. Adam is one of my superstars inside of Accelerator, and I've seen him actually implement a lot of the things that we're working on. So that's why I invited him onto the show. If you want to see the show notes, you can go to mydigitalfarmer.com/244. If you like today's episode, please leave me a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts, or
maybe just copy and paste the URL link for this episode and text it to a friend. I want as many farmers as possible to know that this podcast exists. There's so much good stuff in here. So let's share the wealth. If you want to get on my email list and get some free marketing tips for your farm, don't forget, go to mydigitalfarmer.com/subscribe, and you can start getting that crash course in marketing right away. I'm also on Instagram at mydigitalfarmer. If you want to go check out my content there, I try to show up in stories a few times a week and share what's going on and some marketing tips as I'm going through it in my own journey. And I'm also looking for some podcast guests. If you have a person that you'd love to see on the show, or if you have a story to tell, please reach out to me. You can email me at mydigitalfarmers@gmail.com, and we can connect and see if it would be a good match. Maybe you can be on the show. That'd be awesome. Hey, thanks for joining me today. Have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you right back here next week. Bye-bye.